In today's session, we want to hopefully bring you some value, some beneficial value to you and your organizations. And we will explore the needs and challenges of accessing and using mainframe application data in your BI tools. In addition, we will present the capabilities of ZTrim Data Provider, as John mentioned, and we will also present an application use case for reducing fraud. Again, there will be a Q&A at the end of the session, so feel free to submit your questions via the WebEx Q&A chat, and certainly feel free to do that while the presentation is going on. We are all aware of the growing problem of data breaches. There are startling statistics associated with the number of incidents, the volume of records exposed, and the monetary impact to organizations. Over 10 billion records and almost 8,000 breaches have been compromised since public reporting began in 2005. In 2017, there was a 45% increase in incidents over the previous year. On average, that means 1.2 million records are impacted per incident. Notice the sharp increase in occurrence of breaches between 2012 and 2016, representing an overall 240% increase. The increase in incidents means an increase in identity theft and, taken to the obvious conclusion, increases in compromised account access. The resulting impact is an increase in the occurrence of e-fraud. As observed recently by Gartner, the costs are significant and often difficult to measure. The question we have to ask is, how can organizations meet this growing challenge and reduce the impact? What if you could deploy a solution that aligned with recommendations made by Gartner research? A solution that could identify malicious activity, provide context analysis that was also flexible, exploited real-time data, and analyzed activity and behavior across potentially multiple channels using application processes. While RSD was meeting with a leading bank in Europe, some specific facts and issues began to emerge during those discussions. According to IBM, as a worldwide average, 70% of business-critical company data is hosted and processed on mainframe systems. The solution that would meet the Gartner recommendations mentioned earlier requires data scientists and BI teams to have access to mainframe data. Think about that. Access to this data, or even the sharing of data between mainframe and many BI platforms, is not a typical configuration and presents some interesting challenges. The bank had a specific goal to increase their ability to detect fraud. They needed to focus on reducing the user and financial impact specifically. How could information about transactions be made available to the analytics platform and meet their stringent security requirements? Just a few facts about the environment might be helpful. First of all, business applications that process transactions associated with money transfers ran on the mainframe. Analytics that were already in place, track and analyze customer behavior, run on a distributed platform. Mainframe application be inserted into the analysis process and expand their capabilities for the detection of fraud. RSD partnered in a collaborative effort with the bank's IT team. what RSD provided were we leveraged technology that RSD already possessed and had years of expertise using. We integrated with BI analytics processes already in use to leverage those platforms, and then also met requirements that processing should be handled in the distributed environment. Specifically, zTrim Data Provider yielded these benefits: easy to implement and use, non-intrusive to the system or the processing application. The transfer of data between the mainframe and the analytic system is secure and takes a few seconds. And there's no consumption of mainframe resources for the processing of the data. This overview of the zTrim Data Provider solution illustrates the ease of implementation. As mentioned earlier, the mainframe application processes transactions and generates a specifically defined SMF record using zTrim Capture RSD's process. The SMF records file is transferred to the zTrim ingester running on Linux, which extracts the data and generates a JSON file ready for use by the BI application. Simplicity and flexibility as standard system processes are used, and output in JSON can be utilized by many BI solutions currently in place in many organizations. Specific benefits of the zTrim Data Provider solution that came from the use case collaboration and an exciting product offering that we would like to announce as we introduce zTrim Data Provider. The process is secure as SMF is protected by the mainframe security paradigm in place, whether that is RACF, ACF2, top secret. And file transfer can use typical internal processes for point-to-point protocol. There is no impact on the application quality of service as the data is sent to the highly available SMF capture mechanism. Data extraction and processing took a few seconds. The proof of concept between RSD and the bank was completed in one day. I think it's pretty amazing. zTrim Data Provider is introduced with an affordable subscription licensing model, and John Scagnelli and Jim Guthrie, our account reps, can answer more questions about that. So what about your organization? What mainframe data should you provide to your BI team? Today, we introduce zTrim Data Provider along with a proof of concept study of an application for e-fraud. But what mainframe data analysis challenges or opportunities does your organization face? For example, there's also been interest in using zTrim for analysis of marketing data, planning for campaigns, analyzing customer behavior for other purposes. Another area of interest is related to the analysis of security data for audit compliance activities. What other ideas might you have? We welcome discussions or meetings with your BI and data science teams as your organization considers some of the challenges they're facing. Now we'll move into a Q&A, and we'll answer any questions that you have. We also have some that we kind of pre-prepared, and we'll cover those, and I'll turn that over to Pauline at this time. Pauline?
Hello. Okay. Thanks, Craig, for this introduction on zTrim Data Provider. So I am available to answer the question if you submit them using the Q&A section of the chat. I actually received one question. If you could explain on how proven is the Trim data provider?
Yeah, we can answer that. Leveraging the capture module that we're using for EOS, we create our own SMF record, and basically that is something that RSD has been doing for some time associated with some of our other products. And then also we're leveraging the ingester that I spoke of. We're using that for an additional product that's called Z-Trim Operations Analytics, and we designed it in such a way that it's highly efficient. And what it does basically is it ingests the records, processes them, and in the case of data provider, as I mentioned, then we generate a JSON file as output.
So a new question, what is the mechanism used, what is the mechanism used
to intercept data and to create the SMF record?
So basically in the case of the bank and the proof of concept, what we did was they had a specific process for the fraud, or actually the transactions associated with the wire transfers. And so what we're doing when that commit happens is we're actually intercepting at that point. There is an assembly module that was used, and basically what they're doing at that point, then they are, when they do the transaction complete step, they are actually generating an SMF record for each transaction. Did I answer the question, I think? If I understood specifically what was being asked.
Yes, thanks. New question. Does the Trim data provider have its own BI client and backend capability, or is it a JSON data source provider only?
What we're proposing is that in most organizations, they already have some type of analytics in place where they are tracking various things. They may be tracking audit activities. I mean, obviously in BI environments, they can be using it for a lot of various activities. What we are proposing is that we would integrate into their current BI environment.
New question. Can you provide some details on the step to implement the solution?
Pauline, could you ask that question again? I want to make sure that I have it right.
If you could provide some details on the steps to implement the Trim data provider.
Sure. So obviously we have two platforms that we're working with in the configuration and in the implementation. On ZOS, the implementation is an assembly module to capture the data from the application, and then also to specify that specific SMF record. So what we're doing is exploiting capabilities to actually define an SMF record. And then on the Linux side, basically the implementation of a Java library to extract the data from the SMF record, be able to process the input file, and then produce the JSON output file for to be processed into the BI application. Is there other questions anybody have on the call that we can answer?
If you could explain the licensing model for the Trim, or John?
John, do you want to take a stab at that, or do you want me to have a go?
Our licensing model, as with the EOS 360, is going to be a subscription license. It'll be a 3-year license, so you don't have to go to your capital budget, you can get it out of your operating budget. And if you have any more specific questions on what the actual cost is, you can either get a hold of me or Jim Guthrie.
Yeah, I think that, so per module, obviously these modules are very specific to an application. I think, John, the discussions have been that the price per module would be, what, about $5K a month?
Yeah, somewhere in that neighborhood. Yep.
New question. What are the applications requirements to implement the Trim Data Provider?
There really aren't any specific restrictions, I guess, or requirements. We can extract data from CICS, IMS, or batch applications. Obviously, if you're running, you would be running SMF, so we can exploit the features of SMF. And I would say that obviously, as SMF develops, some of you may be aware that there are other capabilities that are proposed in the future and new offerings associated with SMF. So we certainly will be looking at those and integrating with those as well.
New question, if you could share real-world examples of other businesses using the mainframe JSON data where a fraud scenario was detected and the details of how that was technically accomplished, including the BI analytics.
Well, I don't. So, yeah, Gabe, you want to?
Okay. So here we were working with a leading European bank who already had a fraud detection program in place, but the data scientists were missing the information about the wire transfer in order to enrich their fraud detection program and enrich their data analysis model. So this wire transfer were managed by a KICS application, and therefore we leverage the Z-Trim data capture module in order to capture the information about the target of the wire, the amount of the wire transfer, and the date, the timestamp of the wire transfer, and send this information to the Z-Trim capture model, which stored the information in a specific SMF record, and then we extracted it and transferred it to the Hadoop repository to enrich their fraud detection program.
Yeah, and I would say the only other thing I would add to that is that in organizations that are already using BI for maybe similar activities, maybe the question to go back and ask those teams is, where are their gaps? I can almost guarantee you that they've talked about this internally. Where are the gaps in the data that they have? They know that there's other data that they need and they would like to have. One of the things that they sometimes struggle with, and that is a challenge in a lot of organizations, is an understanding of where all that data is actually available. And what we've been able to do is exploit the capabilities to help them understand that in many organizations, the mainframe is a wealth of data and processing, and it may be the gap that you're looking for in your BI environment that you haven't been able to include today.
And to totally confirm what you just said, Craig, is that since the POC was completed extremely quickly with this bank, there are other entities who are now telling us that they would like to transfer some additional data for marketing campaign or for security audits. So there are other applications of the Trim Data Provider, and it's really important to identify which information do the data scientists need and they don't have access today to, and that is stored on the mainframe, and the data provider can help on transferring this data and enabling access to the data scientist to this data.
Sure. Are there other questions? Okay. Well, thank you for taking the time to meet with us today. We want you to enjoy the rest of your day. For more information about ZTrim and about RSD, we encourage you to contact us at www.rsd.com. You can see more at /ZTrim as well. You're welcome to contact me as well. My email address is listed there, c.hilburn. Be glad to answer any questions that you have or follow up with anything. And I'm sure that John Scagnelli and Jim Guthrie would entertain your questions as well and get back to you right away.